You were just on a panel and you said you have an aversion to making news. I'm going to try nonetheless. I think there are a lot of folks wondering about Brazil in particular, seen as this test case for the Section 301 tariffs. Statutory deadline is today. Anything that you can say about the process and where it stands and what we can expect?
Yeah, it's today. So our Section 301 investigations, they are legal investigations. We have 2 sets of hearings. We do 2 sets of public comments. And we're focused on unfair trading practices by Brazil. So we have to have a legal basis to do this. And there are all kinds of things that Brazil has been doing. They've been censoring our digital tech companies. They've been restricting our access for ethanol to their market. They've been actually engaging in illegal deforestation in the Amazon, which gives them a leg up on all the ag, where they displace our ag exports to third countries. So there are a lot of things like this that have been a problem for a long time with Brazil. So we've been investigating this. Today we'll announce our final action. I had a video conversation with my counterpart in Brazil last night. Very cordial. We've had intensive negotiations with them. I think there's still a lot of gaps between us, so we probably have to have some kind of action, but then continued discussions, I think.
Expectation 25%? In line with what you're thinking in terms of the range?
Well, this is what was proposed by my office at the president's direction. So this is probably what we're looking at. Again, I don't want to get ahead of the president. He's signing something today. I just got off the phone with him, and so we'll have more details to come. But again, I just want to emphasize these are unfair trading practices that Brazil has had in place against American exporters and workers for many years. The president is trying to resolve these, and we're doing it by negotiation, where we need to use leverage of tariffs. That's what we're allowed to do with Section 301. We'll do that where it's necessary.
I'll ask you about Vietnam as well. I understand representatives of Vietnam have been in Washington meeting with your staff. Any update that you can give us on the status of those negotiations?
Yes. So we have Vietnamese officials in Washington this week negotiating. With all of the trade deals we've done over the past year and a half, all of them have had some core issues. Obviously, tariffs. We want other countries to take down their tariffs. Non-tariff barriers, where they restrict U.S. exports of goods and services. Also things like economic security, where if we're going to be shipping them some of our high-tech equipment, they need to align with us on export controls and other things. So this is something we expect from the Vietnamese. And then there are things like just basic standards of intellectual property and other things, the type of things that the rules that our companies abide by, we want them to do so as well. So I have a separate investigation with Vietnam involving intellectual property because they've been a bad actor in this space. So these are the types of things, intellectual property, economic security, where we still have open areas of discussion.
Switzerland's top trade diplomat told Bloomberg there's a good chance they'll get to a 15% deal, something stable. Can you confirm that negotiations with Switzerland are going well?
Well, I know that that's what they want. I know that is the substance of a framework agreement we agreed to a few months ago. One interesting thing with Switzerland, we've been very concerned with our trade deficit with Switzerland, but over the past 6 to 7 months, the United States is now in surplus with Switzerland in goods. So that's a really positive development. The Swiss are investing here in America. In fact, this week I'm going to visit a plant in Utah where they are producing railway equipment. It's a Swiss company. They're coming here. They're bringing their apprenticeship program. So the Swiss are doing a lot of the things they need to do to get right with the U.S. Negotiations are still ongoing, so I can't guarantee anything, but there's positive direction there.
I'll ask you about this sanctions bill, newly elevated after the passing of Senator Lindsey Graham. Senator Richard Blumenthal said you've been involved in conversations about that. Is it in a place now that you and the White House are happy with?
So there are a lot of elements to this bill. There's a tariff element, there's a sanctions element, all of which are designed to give the president discretion to deploy pressure on Russia and those who are supporting Russia. So we've worked very constructively with the Senate on this. There are a lot of good things to be said about it. I just spoke with the president about it as well. So I think there's an openness there. I think we'll see within the next couple of days, final views from the president on whether he wants to be supportive. I think that we have it in a pretty good place. I think it's meaningful that this is something that Senator Graham and I and Senator Blumenthal and others were working on up until his last days, and that's meaningful as well.
It would give the president the latitude to impose tariffs of up to 100%, as I understand it, on the largest importers of Russian oil. Any indication from him if he's prepared to do that should this be passed? Well,
I mean, I think, when I talk to the president about this kind of issue, he wants to be careful about the way he deploys this kind of leverage. Geopolitics are very fragile, and this is something, whether it's a tariff action or sanctions action or anything, it's something that the president thinks about very carefully. He certainly talks to me, he talks to Secretary Besant, Secretary Rubio, Secretary Lutnick. He talks to everybody. He talks to people outside the government. He wants to hit the right spot of putting pressure on countries and putting pressure on Russia without creating more conflict or reducing the likelihood of a peace deal.
The Section 122 tariff set to expire in just a couple of days, really a few days from now.
July 24th.
July 24th. All but certain that the 301 tariff is going to affect after that, or are we looking at perhaps a lapse kind of in coverage?
I mean, the reality is the Section 301 investigations I'm doing, where we've proposed some tariffs, they're on their own track. We're moving quickly, deliberately, because we want to resolve the unfair trading practices that we're targeting with these investigations. So we're going to do them as soon as we can to get at these practices. Whether they're day before, day of, day after, that's less important to us than making sure we're addressing these unfair trading practices and getting the leverage in place we need to resolve them.
Do you have a timetable for when you're going to bring that report to the president, when you might see them enacted?
Well, we have a couple, right?
Yeah.
So we have a Section 301 on forced labor, targeting countries who don't ban the import of forced labor goods. We do in America, other countries don't. Some have a law, but they don't necessarily enforce it. So we already have our report out on that, and so we can take action, I think, fairly quickly on that within the next few weeks. We have another investigation that's targeting a more compact group of countries on structural excess capacity. These are countries who typically have a big trade deficit with the world, or a big trade surplus with the world, or a big trade surplus with us, or even if they don't, they may have practices that generate factories or production that are totally out of whack with global demand. So this is a quite intense project. I have dozens and dozens of attorneys and policy makers working on this to really examine all of these practices. So it takes a little longer time than doing this forced labor one, which is a little bit of a binary where you're looking at what do they have in place and are they enforcing it. This is more complex.
Does that explain the delay entirely, or how long it's taking, or if there's been reports that maybe the China issue is complicating it more than it is with the others?
No, I don't think that's the case at all, right? I mean, China is included in this structural excess capacity, Section 301. The reality is it's a more complex investigation, and we have to make sure that we are hitting our milestones. We've received a lot of comments from the public. We have to analyze those. We have to incorporate them into any responsive action we might take. So we're trying to make sure that we're actually living up to the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. We want to make sure that we're targeting these these unfair trading practices that have led to, frankly, offshoring in the U.S. and an inability to build new factories at times. When you have other countries that are building factories or they're depressing demand in their own country, this is not how market economics are supposed to work. And it creates a situation where there's not enough incentive to build a new factory in America or to employ American workers because we have overcapacity elsewhere. So we want to make sure that capacity is restricted, or that we mitigate it somehow in our own economy so we can have market incentives to build here and to make here.
I want to ask you about rare earths, and I wonder how you would assess China's performance when it comes to rare earths. And as we get closer to October, do you anticipate that agreement will be renewed in due course?
So China's compliance with the rare earth elements of our agreements, it's not perfect. I think everyone knows that. You can read that in the paper. That being said, we are getting a flow of rare earths. We don't have factories shutting down because they don't have it. But again, we really want to be in a position where we were, in 2024 and 2023 in President Trump's first term, where we had a regular flow of rare earths. We also know that the Chinese, they use rare earths for economic coercion. They did it in 2010 and 2011. They're doing it now, so it's not necessarily surprising. But we're continuing to have some flow, and where we have gaps, where we have problems, the Secretary of the Treasury and I, we work with our counterpart in China to try to loosen that flow up. Sometimes we're more successful than others. One important thing is we're moving forward in the U.S. on rare earth production. One of the things I'm doing on my trip out west here, I'm going to Utah to visit a facility where they've discovered rare earths in the Utah desert, and they're refining them and further manufacturing them at a facility in Utah, which is a great development for U.S. national and economic security.
You've got rare earths. There's huge pharmaceutical dependence as well. And I wonder how you're thinking about that, the way that you can kind of curb our reliance on Chinese pharmaceuticals and ingredients.
Yeah, we think about this a lot. This is really critical because at the end of the day, if somehow you lose access to Chinese inputs, it can be a huge challenge for our own manufacturing base. And some people will say, well, what about India? Fine, but a lot of the inputs that India uses also come from China. One great thing that we're seeing as we try to encourage companies to reshore is we actually have commitments from 17 pharmaceutical companies, the largest and the most major pharmaceutical companies, not only to lower prices of medication here in the U.S. Pharmaceutical prices have gone down by 2.5%, but they've also agreed to reshore here and to manufacture here. And so we have companies like Eli Lilly and Novartis and others actually pouring concrete and superstructures going up in new facilities in North Carolina and Indiana and Southern California. So this actually, for me, has been a really bright spot of our efforts to reshore critical production in America. In
the Trade Reps glossary, transshipments is a word. And
yes. Yes.
I'm wondering how you are thinking about monitoring and blocking transshipment when it comes to China.
So it is a word in our glossary,
yeah.
but it can mean different things, right? There's kind of like your pure illegal transshipment where something's made in China, they send it to Vietnam, and they put a made in Vietnam sticker and send it over. It's just illegal, right? And that's on Customs and Border Protection to enforce that, right? To do investigations, to identify areas of fraud and go after it. And we're doing that. A day or two ago, we had a big announcement with DOJ teaming up with CBP. They've already found $1 billion in customs fraud, and some of that is transshipment. And then you have another issue where you have, it's often Asian inputs, China, Vietnam. They go to a third country, maybe Mexico, and they do just enough work where they can legally say, this is actually from Mexico, so maybe we should get a better tariff rate than if it were from China. That's an issue and that's a problem. With Mexico, right now, for example, in some of our discussions, we're talking about rules of origin and saying if you want to get a better deal bringing something in from Mexico or name your country, you have to make sure it actually has U.S. content. You have to make sure it actually has Mexican content or whatever it is, and you have to have that as high as possible to protect against this other type of transshipment, which is a little more difficult to detect.
Last question here, and you're going to have to tell me how you triage your schedule and look at all of these deadlines. But
yeah.
There's a long way to go until this meeting in September when the Chinese president comes to the United States. But let me ask you lastly, sort of how you're thinking about that. You were so integral to the conversations that took place in Beijing. What are you expecting, deliverables-wise, to come out of that meeting in Washington in a couple months?
Well, the number one deliverable we always have between President Trump and President Xi is to continue the stability of the relationship. Both of these leaders are very committed to having a strong and solid personal relationship. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have issues in the broader relationship. Obviously, we do. China is a big challenge for the U.S. in a lot of ways. But we want to make sure we're delivering stability. There's never been a situation where the U.S. side or even the Chinese side has gone out and said, everyone should expect a comprehensive agreement that resolves all issues. Like, no one's ever promised that, so that's not what we expect. We will have an opportunity to take stock of Chinese commitments with respect to purchases of soybeans and other agricultural products. We'll take stock on the rare earth issues we decided. So I think it'll be a moment for stock taking, confirming the relationship, making sure that China's complying with what it's agreed to do. That's really what we're looking forward to in this meeting.